Entire cities float because of it, gods rise and fall because of it, civilizations are built and erased because of it. Magic in D&D isn't rare or mysterious, it's foundational. It shapes the land, the history, and the fate of entire worlds. In fact, it's often harder to find a creature that can't use magic than one that can. But while magic itself is everywhere, mastery of it is not. Among the countless spellcasters across D&D's many settings, a handful stand so far above the rest that they stop feeling like characters and start feeling like forces of nature. So today we're ranking the most powerful spellcasters in Dungeons & Dragons lore. Not by who throws the biggest fireball though, but by who truly mastered the art. For this ranking, I'll be using 3rd edition statistics for each of these characters, and there are a couple good reasons for that. First, 3rd edition goes into far more mechanical depth than 5th edition, it's less hand-wavy and it actually gives us the concrete numbers we need to make a comparison like this meaningful. Secondly, many of the characters in this video simply don't exist in 5th edition lore yet. Some of them haven't been mentioned since 3rd edition at all, which makes evaluating them through a 5e lens basically impossible. Also, as a reference, just for something for you to compare these characters against, in 3rd edition, an ancient red dragon, one of the fiercest, scariest enemies any mortal could face, has a challenge rating of 23, that's in 3rd edition, so keep that in mind for the rest of this list. But with that out of the way, let's talk about spellcaster number 9, Gromp Bainry. And we're starting at number 9 because I couldn't really decide who I wanted to be number 10. So it's a top 9 list. Gromp Bainry is the Drow Archmage of Menzoberranzan, the City of Spiders, deep within the North Star. With a challenge rating of just 20, he's the lowest ranked spellcaster we'll be discussing today. Gromp represents the upper limit of power a player character can realistically reach in both 3rd and 5th edition, before stepping beyond 20th level into the 3rd edition's epic level territory, where spellcasters continue to advance all the way up to level 30. Gromp is a powerful alchemist in his own right, but his strength doesn't come from spellcasting alone. He possesses several magical items that further augment his abilities, one of the most notable of them being the Robes of the Archmage of Menzoberranzan, a heavily enchanted set of robes that significantly amplify his already pretty incredible arcane power. Gromp has a drive to constantly pursue greater strength, but he's always relatively conservative in how he wields the strength he gains. On multiple occasions, he has had opportunities to challenge the matriarchy of Menzoberranzan, the kind of upper brass of power, and he had potential to bring it crashing down, but each time he chose restraint, he understood the risks that came with challenging his superiors. Failure would mean annihilation, and whilst he doesn't worship his goddess Lolth in the way many Drow do, he is very aware that defying a goddess, especially, that goddess, rarely ends well. Gromp is an incredibly dangerous spellcaster, and one of the most powerful enemies a D&D party is ever likely to encounter, but he's here at the bottom of the list for a reason. The spells he casts, the items he possesses, the feats he's pulled off, they're impressive, but compared to the spellcasters we're about to discuss, he really doesn't stack up. Next on our list at number 8, with a strong challenge rating of 25, is Manshoon. Manshoon is a lawful evil human and founder of the Zentarian Mercenary Company, an organisation which you might actually recognise if you play Baldur's Gate 3. While Manshoon is a formidable wizard, there's one trait that elevates him far beyond a standard archmage, and that is his network of clones. In 1370 DR, Manshoon was slain, or rather the original Manshoon was. At the time of that Manshoon's death, he had more than a dozen active clones, each ready to step into his place almost immediately. Killing him doesn't mean victory, it just means you've dealt with one Manshoon, and there's no guarantee there aren't several more waiting just beyond the next door, ready to retaliate. Manshoon was dangerous enough for even Elminster, who is someone we will highlight the great power of a little bit further down the line, treated him with genuine caution. Not because Manshoon was stronger, but because he was cunning and occasionally absurdly lethal. According to the law, on 2 separate occasions, Manshoon managed to use the thralled body of a beholder to blast Elminster into literal dust, effectively killing him twice. Elminster must have been taking a day off or just not trying or something, because as you'll see later, the power gap between this tier at Manshoon and the kind of levels of power that Elminster is playing with is absolutely disgusting. So what exactly Elminster is doing to get vaporized, twice, you know, who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. Another person that Manchun and his many clones had serious beef with was someone called Mert, or Mert the Moneylender was his full title that he often went by. And this is a man who sat at CR 13, a whole 12 CR rating below Manchun, and yet it's stated that Mert the Moneylender gave Manchun more trouble than Elminster ever did, which you don't have an explanation for, nor could I find one. The Forgotten Realms lore just be like that sometimes. Next up at number 7 is one who is near and dear to my heart, being the topic of my second ever video on this channel, and that is Mordenkainen, who sits at a respectable 27 challenge rating. Mordenkainen is the Arc Wizard of Oerth within the Greyhawk setting. Mordenkainen has invented numerous spells of his own, tutored many wizards who would go on to create spells as well, and stood at the centre of arcane theory for decades. He was the founder and leading figure of the Circle of Eight, a legendary group of powerful spellcasters tasked with preserving the balance of the multiverse itself. Mordenkainen is obsessively devoted to the idea that no single force should ever be allowed to dominate reality. Empires rise, gods scheme, fiends and devils plot, and Mordenkainen watches all of it, intervening only when the scales tip too far in one direction. His alignment, chaotic neutral, reflects this idea perfectly. He is not concerned with good or evil, only equilibrium, only balance. In terms of raw power, Mordenkainen is an archmage in the truest sense. He is amongst one of the most powerful. He also possesses an extensive collection of powerful magical items and artifacts, not for vanity though or conquest, but as tools, levers he can pull when the balance needs correcting. Mordenkainen is absolutely willing to arm devils with powerful artifacts if it helps prevent demons from gaining the upper hand in the blood war, because for him the outcome matters more than the optic. Victory for either side is unacceptable. A stalemate in his eyes is success. And if all of that wasn't enough, there's one final, delightfully meta detail. Mordenkainen has canonically, alongside Elminster, been known to visit Ed Greenwood, or Ed of the Greenwood as he's referred to in the universe, on the planet Earth itself, which is a detail I think is really sick. This guy is powerful enough and renowned enough to visit the creator of the Forgotten Realms setting that so many of our adventures take place in, on our own planet Earth, which is just really meta and really cool. At number 6, we've got our first Netherese Arcanist on the list, Larlock the Shadow King. And right out of the gate, he's sitting at a pretty wild challenge rating of 34. Remember, an ancient red dragon is only 23, so now we're getting to some pretty elite levels of power here. Larlock was born during the shadowed age of the Netherreal Empire and would eventually become the Sorcerer King of the floating enclave of Jixador, just one of the many floating cities Netherreal had at the height of his power. It's here that he earned the title Shadow King, and not long after chose to undergo the transformation into a lich. One of Larlock's biggest projects during this time was the creation of the Death Moon Orb, a powerful artifact that allowed him to mentally dominate his own court and even summon fiends in the lower planes. The orb didn't survive the fall of Netherreal, but Larlock's skill at crafting extremely powerful magic items certainly did. For centuries afterwards, he continued creating and collecting artifacts, which is a big part of why he's such a dangerous spellcaster. When it comes to Larlock's personal power though, things get a little bit vague, and that's sort of the point. Larlock has used the Wish spell and ancient rituals to permanently alter his lich form, enhancing himself well beyond what you'd expect from a normal Arcanist lich. Exactly what those upgrades are and what they do isn't really known, and that uncertainty is part of what makes him so hard to deal with. What is known already though is pretty nasty. Larlock radiates a fear aura that can overwhelm weaker creatures, and he's completely immune to one spell of every spell level, from first level all the way up to 9th level. Again, what those spells are, unknown, only Larlock knows, and anyone who tries to find out the hard way usually doesn't get a second attempt. And even if you do manage to seriously hurt Larlock, it still doesn't really mean much, because he's infamous for stacking contingencies on top of contingencies, and he's been known to simply teleport away, just blip away right before your eyes the moment things go south, retreating somewhere hidden and safe to recover. This guy isn't the kind of threat that rushes you head on. He's methodical, he's extremely prepared, and it's exactly why he ranks this high on the list. Because don't get me wrong, like, this guy is really powerful. He was a Netherese Arcanist, but this guy plans a lot and has plans on top of plans. Like, catching this guy off guard isn't going to work, like, at all. And this is just number 6 on our spot. We've got like 5 more entries to go, so shit's going to get even more insane. But before we do talk about any higher powers than CR34, there is someone else who also sits at challenge rating 34 that is definitely worth mentioning, and that is Leiral Silverhand, coming in at number 5 on this list. Or I guess kind of like joint 6 and 5 with Larlock. They're both ranked CR34, so yeah, whatever. Where Larlock represents a cold, calculating, lawful evil approach to magic, Leiral sits almost at the opposite end of the spectrum as a chaotic good wizard, and like Larlock, she's very much someone you do not want to underestimate. Known as the Witch Queen of the North and the Lady Maid of Waterdeep, Leiral Silverhand is one of the most prolific and accomplished wizards in all the realms. She isn't just powerful in terms of spellcasting either. Leiral is widely regarded as one of the greatest magic item creators in recorded history, probably surpassing Larlock. On top of that, Leiral possessed an almost supernatural talent for understanding magic items, capable of discerning an artifact's properties simply by touching it. And then there's easily the most important part of this character, and that is that Leiral Silverhand is a chosen of Mystra, one of the legendary Seven Sisters. As one of Mystra's chosen, Leiral was granted some abilities far beyond just enhanced spellcasting. For instance, she possessed the ability to cause magical items to malfunction or even shut down entirely simply by touching them. This is immensely powerful, but it did have limits. For instance, it didn't function against items on the level of true artifacts. For example, Leiral was unable to immediately negate the effects of the Crown of Horns when she was tricked into wearing it. Even so, the ability to nullify magical items of almost any tier is an incredibly powerful and genuinely game-changing advantage. As a chosen of Mystra, Leiral also could wield Spellfire, which is a wildly potent form of magical energy manipulation. It allows the caster to wield raw energy from the weave to create blue-white flames, healing power, and absorb magical energy. It's kind of like an all-in-one form of magic, and it's one that lots of chosen of Mystra gain access to, and it's a little bit broken. It's a really, really powerful form of magic. But yet, even considering this, considering everything Leiral can do with her mastery of magic items, her status as one of the Seven Sisters of Mystra, and being a chosen of Mystra, Leiral still begins to feel almost modest when placed among the other spellcasters we are yet to discuss, which should give you a sense of just how unhinged the top of this list is about to get. The next person we're going to talk about coming in at number 4 is Elastra Silverhand, better known as The Symbol. And no, the shared surname with Leiral Silverhand isn't a coincidence. Elastra is also one of the Seven Sisters, another chosen of Mystra, and notably the most powerful of all the Seven Sisters, boasting a challenge rating of 36. Now, as a chosen of Mystra, the symbol naturally comes packaged with all the usual buffs and advantages you'd expect. You know, a stronger connection to magic, stronger spellcasting, a better understanding of it, etc. And there's no real need to really go over that side of things. What really matters are the traits that set Elastra apart from the rest of her sisters, and the biggest one by far is her mind. And not in a kind of, oh, she's a big brainiac, super smart kind of way. Perhaps the most distinctive aspect of her mind is that it is fractured. She is unstable mentally, and crucially, it's this instability that actually makes her more dangerous. In The Seven Sisters from 2nd edition, the symbol is described as being, frankly, rather unhinged in how she approaches magic and power. She doesn't just think on a different level, she thinks without the usual restraints most archmages place on themselves. One pretty revealing moment comes from a confession she made to a sage in Candlekeep, when the sage asked about her plans for Aglarond once the Red Wizards of Thay were no longer a threat. Her answer was ambitious, to put it mildly. She spoke openly about destroying the Thay entirely, rebuilding Rashomon and Algarond under a new political and cultural order, and then going even further, smashing the decadent old empires of Umther and Mulhorand, reforming them into agrarian societies rather than dust-blown slave empires. These are her words, by the way, like verbatim pretty much. And at face value, that almost sounds benevolent, but what the symbol is really proposing here is mass destruction first, reform later. The belief that if the world is broken and you're powerful enough to fix it, then you're obligated to do so. And that mindset, that certainty, is what makes her so frightening, even to other archmages. Other archmages such as one of her own sisters, Storm Silverhand, who stated, quote, "Of us all, Elastra should have been called Storm, not me." I'm but a minor squall from time to time, but her fury challenges the anger of the gods. End quote. Across the realms, the common folk feared the symbol more than any other of the Seven Sisters. She's widely regarded as unpredictable, volatile, and frankly unsafe to be around. This is something that the symbol has openly admitted before, and it's entirely possible that the symbol isn't dramatically more powerful than Label Silverhand, who sits just beneath her in the hierarchy of the Seven, but perhaps the real reason the symbol is so often considered the strongest of them all may not come down to raw magical output at all. It may simply be because she's just a little bit batshit crazy, where Layrel is more controlled and reserved in her use of magic. The symbol is willing to follow instinct over caution, to lash out, to overcast, and to push magic past safe limits without stopping to consider the consequences and simply kind of do whatever the fuck she wants. When considering the level of remorse she feels for killing people that get in her way, she stated, quote, "By choosing the lives they did, they chose also their deaths. They could have cultivated wisdom enough to stand clear of me." End quote. And at this level of magic, that lack of restraint can be the difference between immense power and truly terrifying power. But talking about truly terrifying power, it's now time to talk about someone who is considered by most to be the most powerful magic user in all of D&D lore, and that is none other than the Sage of Shadowdale, Elminster Umar, coming in at a whopping challenge rating of 39. And you may be wondering, oh, most powerful spellcaster of all, but he's number 3 on this list. Yeah, there's still more people to discuss even after everything I'm about to say about this guy. Elminster is often treated as the Archmage of the Forgotten Realms. He is Mystra's longest serving and most trusted chosen, a role that places him closer to the machinery of magic itself than almost any mortal who has ever lived. He is even cool enough to have been Mystra's lover for a while. It is stated that the first lover of this guy was the goddess of magic. I mean, what a badass. Mechanically, Elminster is absurd. His 3rd edition stat block pushes well beyond what most characters are even designed to interact with, and that's before you factor in divine boons, unique spells, artifacts, and centuries of preparation, because this guy is over 1,000 years old. But what truly sets Elminster apart isn't how big his fireballs are, it's his insane level of survivability. Elminster has been disintegrated, vaporized, possessed, stripped of magic, cut off from the weave, and outright killed more times than most spellcasters ever get into combat. And he has walked away from every single one of those experiences. Sometimes through contingencies, sometimes through Mystra's intervention, and sometimes from his girlfriends sacrificing themselves to save him, such as the symbol is. Basically, Elminster is obnoxiously hard to get rid of. Before he ever devoted himself to Mystra, before he was even a wizard at all, he already possessed the innate ability to heal himself. It's stated in the Elminster Series 1, The Making of a Mage, that after a grievous battle with an armsman, that Elminster discovered his innate ability to heal himself. It states, quote, "The white glow was rising and pulsing. Now the one he saw when he gathered his mind, the glow grew and the pain lessened. Thus Elminster pushed with his mind and the white radiance faded. He felt a little tired, but the pain receded. He pushed again and again felt weaker, but now the pain was almost gone." End quote. This isn't learned spellcasting or divine healing, it's unconscious interaction with the weave, at least presumably. And the fact that he can control it, repeat it, and understand its costs at such an early stage is a massive indicator that Elminster was never a normal guy to begin with. He was destined to become something fucking insane. Elminster was also naturally blessed with an almost eidetic memory, capable of recalling details from centuries past with remarkable clarity. What makes this rather unsettling though is the long-standing speculation that not all of his memories are truly his. The idea is that Mystra herself may have implanted knowledge within him, subtly shaping his mind and experiences to forge him into the instrument she believed the realms required. Which is honestly insane work by Mystra. Manipulating a young guy like that? That's crazy work. Elminster and the symbol actually once clashed in a pretty nasty spell duel, and notably it ended without a divisive victor, in much the same way that Layrel and the symbol may not be radically different in terms of raw magical power. It's also reasonable to interpret Elminster's higher challenge rating in a similar light, rather than suggesting that he is casting dramatically stronger spells. The difference in challenge rating likely reflects a shift in how that power manifests. In this interpretation, the symbol's rating is elevated by her volatile, unrestrained mindset. while Elminster's higher challenge rating is better explained by his extraordinary survivability. While yes, I do believe that the symbol ultimately surpasses Label in terms of overall power, and that Elminster stands above both Label and the symbol and Larlock and everyone else we've discussed so far, I don't think these challenge ratings are anywhere near as simple as, higher number means stronger spells. At this tier of Magic, power doesn't really scale in a neat linear way. It isn't about whose spells will matter. Instead, these higher ratings tend to reflect far more complex factors, like survivability, versatility, preparation, and the ability to endure or recover from things that would permanently remove other spellcasting from the game. A perfect example of this is Manchun, one of Elminster's most persistent enemies. Manchun is leagues below Elminster in terms of raw magical power, yet because of his network of friends and his sheer difficulty to permanently eliminate, he remains a genuine threat. That persistence, the fact that killing him doesn't truly end the problem, is what makes Manchun a challenge even for the most powerful wizard in modern D&D lore. As mentioned earlier, he was able to disintegrate Elminster twice. That's not a small feat. And similar to Manchun, Elminster's power is defined by persistence. He survives things that should forever erase other archmages, adapts to catastrophes that rewrite the rules of magic itself, and keeps operating long after others would be gone for good. At this tier, I feel that power isn't much about how much damage you can deal in a single epic spell, it's about who remains standing when others wouldn't. And that's why Elminster sits here, just below the very tippy top of the list. And before we talk about the very top of this list, the last two entries, which for reasons we get into kind of share the top spot, I want to quickly run through a couple of honourable mentions. These are characters who are absurdly powerful, but couldn't quite make the list for some fairly technical reasons. First up in the honourable mentions is a guy called Fizban the Fabulous. Fizban regularly shows up on tier lists as one of the most powerful spellcasters in all the lands, and for good reason. He's a strong dude. The problem is though, is that Fizban isn't actually a mortal spellcaster at all. He's just an alias used by Bahamut, the Platinum Dragon. And as cool as Bahamut is, including a literal god on a list ranging mortal spellcasters felt a bit disingenuous. So Fizban had to sit this one out. The second honourable mention is Gale of Waterdeep, the wizard many of you will know from Baldur's Gate 3. In the game's lore, Gale is hinted to have reached a level of power and an innate connection to the Weave that may well have surpassed even Elminster at its peak. He was also, briefly, a lover of Mystra until things went catastrophically wrong and he ended up with the Orb of Karsus lodged in his chest. Depending on player choice, Gale can even ascend to godhood, using the Crown of Karsus to become the God of Ambition. The issue is that this outcome is only one possible ending, and at the start of the game he's lost much of his former power entirely. That inconsistency makes him extremely difficult to place cleanly in a ranking like this. So rather than forcing him into a spot that doesn't really fit properly, it felt better to give him a well-earned honourable mention here instead. And with that, we reach the end of the list. For the final entry, or rather, we're looking at two legendary archmages whose names sit at the absolute peak of arcane history, Eolium and Karsus, who both hold a challenge rating of shit. They don't have one. So for these two characters, they never actually received a challenge rating anywhere in the lore. Not one that I can find anyway. And because of this, we're going to have to do a little bit of interpretation of numbers to determine what their challenge rating likely would be. Eolium and Karsus both sit at a level of 41, higher than any other spellcaster we've discussed. Elminster sits at a total level of 35 but a challenge rating of 39, while both the Symbol and Larlock come in at a level of 32 but sit at challenge rating 36 and challenge rating 34 respectively. Using that same relationship between level and challenge rating as a reference point, we can begin to extrapolate what an appropriate challenge rating for these two legendary alchemists might reasonably be. At this tier of play, the challenge rating clearly isn't matching the levels 1 to 1. Instead, we're likely seeing modifiers applied based on survivability, volatility, feats and such, and how much of a threat these spellcasters pose beyond a S6.5. If we break this down, Elminster and the Symbol both sit at roughly their class level +4, while Larlock CR has only +2 from what his class level states. That gives us a realistic modifier range of about 2 to 4 CR above total level for spellcasters operating at this extreme end of the scale. Now, if we apply that same logic to Eolium and Karsus, both of whom sit at a combined level of 41, we end up with an inferred challenge rating somewhere between 43 and 45. From there, the distinction isn't really about who throws the bigger spells, it's about how their power expresses itself. So for now, let's place them both in that CR 43 to 45 range, and get into the details of who these characters are, and perhaps at the end of it, we can define a definitive highest CR winner. So, starting with the Archmage, who came first chronologically, we have Eolum. Eolum represents what the upper limit of magical mastery looks like, and the feats he achieved with this power are honestly ridiculous. Eolum was born in Netheril, an empire that became famously defined by its flying cities, and the thing is, those crazy, awe-inspiring spectacles that Netheril is remembered for, they can be traced back to one individual, and that guy was Eolum. The foundational magic that allowed entire cities to tear themselves free from the earth and remain aloft for centuries wasn't the result of a collective effort or gradual discovery, it was the work of Eolum's arcane genius. The flying cities in Netheril weren't just symbols of the Empire's immense power, they were symbols of this one guy's stupidly smart genius. The way that Eolum pulled off that epic feat of floating cities on top of mountains was first accomplished by another epic feat, which was the invention of the Mythallar. These Mythallars were powerful magical constructs that were absolutely foundational to the Netherese Empire. They kind of functioned as massive arcane engines, capable of channeling the weave on an enormous scale, basically like a giant battery. It was this invention that made the first floating enclave possible. By anchoring a Mythallar at its core, Eolum was able to sustain the vast enchantments required to keep the entire city aloft indefinitely. In many ways, the Mythallar was the backbone of Netherese magical supremacy, and the fact that a single wizard was responsible for its creation tells you how insanely gifted this guy was. Eolum is also the longest lived individual on this list. As far as we know, he is still alive even as of 5th edition, with no canon source suggesting otherwise, which would make him over 4,700 years old, and that number alone is absolutely absurd. Of course, this isn't a lifespan he achieved by remaining human, because in -371 DR, Eolum successfully transformed himself into a lich to extend his existence beyond mortal limits. Then, centuries later, in 329 DR, he accomplished something even more crazy by transferring his consciousness into an undead Illithid elder brain, not only surviving the process but actually retaining his identity and his intellect, remaining who he was whilst living inside an Illithid elder brain, an undead one at that. That feat alone is an almost unparalleled feat of arcane insanity. It's one thing to achieve immortality like he did, it's another thing entirely to abandon your real multiple times and remain yourself throughout every transition. Taken as a whole, his inventions, his longevity, and his complete refusal to ever truly die, thus far anyway, Eolum makes a very strong case for being the most powerful mortal spellcaster to have ever lived, only potentially eclipsed by one other individual. Karsus, the momentary god and the unmaker of the weave. Now, I know those titles perhaps sound a little bit dramatic, it's got to be said, but they're not without substance. Karsus was born in -696 DR, nearly 3,000 years after Eolum. From the very beginning, he was different. He was casting spells at just 2 years old, and he would go on to become the youngest archwizard in Netherrealm's history to create his own floating enclave, adding yet another levitating mountain city to the Empire's ever-growing skyline. For much of his life, Karsus actually followed a fairly typical path for a Netherrealm's archwizard, if typical can even be used to describe things of this caliber. He expanded his enclave into one of the greatest cities in the Empire, trained countless arcanists, and relentlessly deepened his own understanding of the arcane. By all accounts, he was the most naturally gifted mage Netherrealm had ever produced, but for a long time he was still operating within the system, but eventually that changed. Something that was truly unprecedented was Karsus' decision to attempt the unthinkable, to usurp the goddess of magic herself. Through 3 artifacts of his own creation, the regalia of Karsus, consisting of the crown, sceptre and orb of Karsus, he prepared to cast a spell unlike anything the world had ever seen. The spell was Karsus' Avatar, the only 12th-level spell ever made and ever cast. Its purpose was simple in concept and catastrophic in execution: to target a deity, seize their divine power and ascend in their place. And the deity Karsus chose was none other than Mistral, the goddess of magic. And in doing so, Karsus didn't just test the limits of mortal magic, he kind of completely and utterly tore magic apart, at least for a time anyway. You see, when the goddess of magic was effectively removed from her position, even if it was just briefly, the weave, the very foundation that Netherrealm's magic relied upon, began to unravel. The Mythallars that sustained the floating cities failed, the enclaves plummeted from the sky, and Netherrealm's empire was annihilated almost instantly. Karsus himself died in the process before he could truly stabilise his ascension to godhood. If you've ever heard of the spell plague in D&D lore, it's this exact action from Karsus that caused that catastrophic event. So yeah, it's probably fair to say that Karsus was an incredibly powerful and even more incredibly influential figure in Dungeons & Dragons lore, which then raises the obvious question, who actually deserves the #1 spot? Who should be ranked as the strongest wizard to have ever lived? In my view, in my humble opinion, that answer is Karsus, but there's an important caveat to that decision. Because when assigning challenge ratings in D&D, CR isn't just about raw stats or spell lists. It often reflects exceptional feats, unique circumstances, or narrative impact, especially when comparing individuals of the same general type. For example, a pit fiend has a
You'll need a top-notch team to win this one.
James Gunn just cleared up all the buzz about Wonder Woman's future in the DC universe. After fans started guessing who might play her, Gunn hopped on Threads to set things straight. Someone suggested he might go
We shot a long way from the Big Easy. Gonna have to play X-Men and team if we want to win this one.
The Drow of the Forgotten Realms follow a pantheon known as the Dark Seldarine, a splintered and often hostile group of deities that originated from the Elven gods. At the center of this pantheon is Loth, the Spider Queen, whose fall from grace reshaped the destiny of the Dark Elves. Loth was once Arashni, consort to Corellan Lotharion, leader of the Seldarine. Her betrayal occurred during a cataclysmic period in Elven history known as the Crown Wars. Conflicts between the major Elven nations that spanned millennia and culminated in immense devastation. One of these wars ended with the descent of the Illithiri elves, who were transformed by Corellan into the Drow and banished to the Underdark. Arashni, revealed as a traitor, was cast out and became Loth. Since then, Loth has ruled as the dominant deity of Drow culture. In cities like Menzoberranzan, her priesthood wields absolute power. Worship of any other deity is not just discouraged, it's punished as treason. Most Drow are raised to know only Loth. Alternate gods are remembered in whispers or hidden shrines, often at great personal risk, but they exist. Some serve as ideological opposites to Loth, others as opportunistic rivals or remnants of lost cultures. These include her children Veron, Alestreyi, the undead queen Kiransali, the ancient ooze god Gonadour, and more obscure figures like Selvatarm and Zimzarina. The membership of the Dark Seldarine has changed repeatedly. In the late 1300s DR, the events of the War of the Spider Queen and the Lady Penitent storylines saw Loth eliminate nearly all competition. By 1379 DR, she stood alone, ruling unchallenged for nearly a century. But that dominance didn't last. Following the Second Sundering in the 1480s, the Drow pantheon was restored. Veron, Alestreyi, Kiransali, and others returned, weakening Loth's monopoly and introducing new instability. Even forgotten deities like Zimzarina reappeared, reshaping the divine landscape. What follows is a complete look at each of these gods, their portfolios, alignments, mythologies, and the role they play in Drow worship and society. Welcome to the Drow Historian. Right now, 78% of the people watching these videos every week are not subscribed. If you've been enjoying the lore, subscribing makes a huge difference. It helps the channel reach more people and brings me closer to making the Drow Historian a full-time project with even more content for our shared passion, the Legend of Drizzt. Among the Drow, there is no figure more feared, more worshipped, or more enduring than Loth, Queen of the Demon Web Pits, Weaver of Chaos, and Dark Mother of all Drow. She is the undisputed ruler of the Drow pantheon, a chaotic evil goddess whose influence has shaped not only the religious life of her followers, but the very foundation of their culture. Loth was not always a demon goddess. In the oldest Elven myths, she was known as Arashni, a lesser deity of fate and artistry. and the consort of Corellin Lotharian, the leader of the Seldarine. She bore Corellin twin children, Varan and Alashrayi, but pride turned her heart. Arashni conspired to overthrow Corellin, allying with hostile powers, including the orc god Grump, in an assault on the celestial realm Arvindor. The rebellion failed. As punishment, Arashni was banished from the heavens, transformed into a spider-like demon, and cast into the abyss. Her followers, the elves who supported her cause, were likewise cursed, and they were exiled to the depths of the world. Thus were the Drow born, and Arashni became Loth, a name now spoken with reverence, dread, and devotion. From her lair on the 66th layer of the abyss known as the Inland Pit, Loth clawed her way back into godhood. There she destroyed or subjugated rival powers, among them the elder slime deity Gonadaur and the death goddess Caransali, before setting her sights on the material world. Her influence proved most corrupting during the ancient Crown Wars, when she tempted the dark elven nation of Ilithir with power in exchange for demonic pacts. Their atrocities led to a divine curse and final exile, cementing the Drow's descent into darkness. Loth's role as a divine tyrant is absolute. She shares power with no one. Every other member of the Dark Seldarine, her fellow Drow gods, is either a rival, a pawn, or both. Her son, Varan, god of Drow males and rebellion, is her most persistent enemy. He seeks to overthrow her matriarchy, advocating for male equality and coexistence with surface elves. Her daughter, Alashrayi, the good aligned goddess of song, beauty, and redemption, is regarded by Loth as a sentimental fool, useful only in the rare event her mercy might further the Spider Queen's goals. Selvatarn, the god of war and Loth's grandson through Varan, once stood at a crossroads between his father and grandmother. He hesitated to strike against Loth and has been enslaved to her ever since. Caransali, a necromancer goddess of undeath, once allied with Loth out of fear but harbored treacherous ambitions. Loth tolerated her only so long as she remained subordinate. Outside the Drow pantheon, Loth has formed brief and self-serving alliances with other evil gods, Grump, Malar, Leviatar, and perhaps even the Durgar deity Largware. But these alliances rarely endure. Chaos, after all, is her nature. She delights in pitting her followers against each other, ensuring they are too fractured to ever threaten her rule. One of her boldest moves came during the time of troubles when she hunted down and killed Zinzarina, a lesser Drow goddess of chaos and assassination, absorbing her portfolio to increase her own power. But this was just a prelude. In the 1370s, Loth went silent, withdrawing her divine presence and entering a cocoon within the demon-wrought pit. While her priestesses panicked and rival gods scrambled for influence, Loth transformed, emerging as a greater deity, stronger, more dangerous, more dominant than ever. The years that followed were devastating for the rest of the Dark Seldarine. Selvatarn was destroyed, Caransali was wiped from mortal memory using her own magic of oblivion, Varan and Alashrayi briefly fused into a single deity known as the Masked Lady, and both vanished. By 1379 DR, Loth stood alone. Her ambitions didn't stop there. In the chaos of the spell plague, she tried to seize control of magic itself by weaving a new demon weave, with herself at its center. But this scheme failed. When Mystra returned and reclaimed the weave, Loth was forced to retreat. And then the world changed again. After the second sundering in the 1480s, the Drow gods she had destroyed began to return. Varan, Alashrayi, Caransali, and even Zinzarina re-emerged, reclaiming their power and followers. For the first time in over a century, Loth's monopoly on Drow worship was broken, and to her dismay, Varan and Alashrayi appeared to have reached an accord, coexisting, if not working together, in mutual defiance of her tyranny. Despite this resurgence, Loth remains the dominant force in Drow society. In nearly every major Underdark city, the Spider Queen's priestesses rule. Her worship isn't just religion, it's law, politics, education, and culture. Her dogma promotes chaos, betrayal, and power at any cost. She encourages her followers to lie, kill, and manipulate to advance. Mercy is weakness, unity is heresy. Her clergy, almost entirely composed of female drow, are matron mothers, judges, and generals. Theocratic rule is enforced with fanaticism. Temples dedicated to Loth are massive spider-shaped cathedrals that loom over drow cities. Sacrifices of wealth, blood, and sentient life are commonplace. Giant spiders serve as temple guardians. Orders like the militant Milokar and the Handmaidens of Loth act as enforcers of doctrine, wiping out the scent in entire cities if needed. To the Drow, Loth is both jailer and queen. She is the architect of their suffering and the only salvation they're taught to believe in. Her web is vast, her cruelty boundless, and in the center of it all, she waits, silent, watching, amused, knowing that every thread leads back to her. Veron is the god of drow males, thievery, shadowy power, ambition, and surface expansion. Known by many titles, the Masked Lord, the Shadow, Night Seer, he stands as a symbol of resistance to the matriarchal domination of Loth. In the early days, he was neutral evil. More recent lore casts him as chaotic evil, though his followers might argue otherwise. He is the son of Loth and Corellin Lotharian, and twin brother to Elestreyi. But unlike Elestreyi, who seeks redemption and peace for the Drow, Veron seeks dominance, particularly for the males that Loth's regime has long suppressed. He preaches not violence for its own sake, but power through strategy, stealth, and calculated rebellion. His ideology is rooted in gender equality among the Drow, but twisted by arrogance and a desire to see Drow supremacy spread to the surface world. From the beginning, Veron has been an open defiance of his mother. He rejects the caste system of Loth-worshipping society and seeks to overturn her rule, city by city, cult by cult. His followers, mostly male Drow, but not exclusively, form covert cells called the Mask. These circles train in stealth, subterfuge, and assassination, often hiding in plain sight within Loth-like cities or operating from remote surface shrines. They steal, raid, and sabotage, not out of chaos, but to prepare for a new Drow order led from the shadows. Relationships between Veron and the other gods are complex and often hostile. He despises Selvatarm for siding with Loth, resents Karansali despite occasional alliances, and considers the human god Mask a rival for control of thievery. His bitterness toward the Seldarine runs deep, especially toward Corellin, and his attitude towards his sister Elestreyi has swung from murderous to begrudgingly cooperative. After the second sundering, the two deities even agreed to a tentative truce. Their followers still clash in places, but the gods themselves appear to have made peace, if only to confront Loth as a shared threat. Veron's faith was nearly extinguished during the Lady Penitent events in the late 14th century DR. Though a bit contentious, it is thought that he was slain by Elestreyi during a divine duel and merged briefly with her essence into a dual-aspect deity known as the Masked Lady. But in the wake of the second sundering, both gods were restored as separate entities. Since his return, Veron has become more subtle. Rather than inciting outright rebellion, he now encourages quiet dissent, whispers behind closed doors, covert empowerment, and the careful undermining of Loth's authority from within. He remains a dangerous, charismatic figure, a god of night, shadow, and subversion, and though his worship is outlawed in nearly every Drow city, his symbol, the Black Mask, still surfaces where male ambition stirs against the Spider Queen.
30 seconds before you attack. Get ready.
Elestreyi is the rarest light in the dark tapestry of Drow faith. Known as the Dark Maiden, Lady of the Dance, and Lady Silverhair, she is a goddess of beauty, freedom, song, sword work, and moonlight. Among her followers, she's spoken of in reverent tones as the Dark Dancer, a name whispered with both sorrow and hope. Unlike nearly every other deity tied to the Drow, Elestreyi is chaotic good. Where Loth demands cruelty and domination, Elestreyi calls her people to gentleness, joy, and redemption. She is the daughter of Loth and Corellin Lotharian, and the twin sister of Veron. But her path was never one of conquest or rebellion, it was sacrifice. When the Dark Elves were cursed and cast down after the Crown Wars, Elestrayi made a choice no other god made. She followed them into exile. Though she had done no wrong, she could not bear to abandon her people to darkness. She gave up the comfort of Arvindor to walk beside them, to be a song in the silence, a moonbeam in the black of the Underdark. Elestrayi's relationship with her family is deeply complex. Loth despises her daughter, branding her a traitor and a weakling. But Elestrayi does not return that hatred. Instead, she mourns what her mother has become and grieves the pain Loth causes. Her relationship with Varon, her brother, was long marked by conflict. He believed in Drow supremacy and surface domination. She believed in coexistence and peace. For centuries, they clashed, ideologically and sometimes physically. During the events of the Lady Penitent, he even slew Varon in self-defense. After the two gods were restored in the Second Sundering, something remarkable happened. The two siblings reconciled. They understood finally that their goals weren't so different, that they both wanted to free the Drow, just through different means. Since then, they've worked in quiet accord. Elestrayi is not counted among the core Seldarine. She left their ranks willingly, but she is respected by some of their number. She shares a close bond with Mystra, the goddess of magic, who preserved Elestrayi's soul through the chaos of the spell plague, enfolding her within the weave itself. Her connection to Selûne is also significant. Both are goddesses of moonlight, and their followers often find common cause in protecting the night. Elestrayi also allies with deities like Luru and Mialiki, sharing their reverence for nature and gentleness. But make no mistake, Elestrayi has enemies. She opposes Loth with every breath and stands firmly against the cruelty of Karansali, Gonadaur, Leviatar, and Malar. Yet even in this, she remains true to her ethos. There are tales of her offering mercy to her enemies, healing the wounded, or showing kindness to the unredeemed. Her compassion is not weakness, it is a blade, soft in hand, but sharp in result. Her symbol is a silver sword crossed over a full moon, and it captures her essence, grace, light, and the will to protect. She is the voice calling Drow out of the shadows, the mother figure offering hope to those who've only known hate. And as long as her song echoes in the hearts of a few, those who dream of dancing in the moonlight without fear, there remains a chance that the Drow, too, may find their way home. There is vengeance, and there is Karansali, known to her followers as the Revenancer, the Lady of the Dead, and the Vengeful Banshee. Karansali is one of the most terrifying figures in the Drow pantheon. She is the goddess of undeath, necromancy, and obsession, driven by a hatred so profound that it has outlasted death itself. Long before her name was whispered in the Underdark, Karansali was mortal, a dark elven sorceress queen from a distant world called Renadu. She was said to be beautiful, cruel, and consumed by pride. Betrayed, perhaps by a husband, perhaps by her people, she responded not with sorrow, but with annihilation. She turned to necromancy, raised an army of the dead, and extinguished all life on her home world. When her rage subsided, she stood victorious, alone on a silent world of corpses. From that graveyard, she fled into the abyss, evading the judgment of the Seldarine, and ascended to godhood among the demons. Karansali may once have been neutral evil, methodical and cold, but centuries of retribution and isolation twisted her into something worse. Her hatred became unmoored from reason, and her divine presence now drips with madness. She is not truly part of the dark Seldarine. Though Loth allowed her into orbit for a time, Loth never trusted her, never respected her, and Karansali returned that contempt in secret, plotting revenge even as she served. She detests Elestrayi, calling mercy a weakness, and treats all other Drow gods as either tools or threats. Her only moments of cooperation came through necessity, whispered alliances with Varon, the god Huar, and Vel-Shirin, all bound by a shared desire for retribution. But even among allies, Karansali was poison in the chalice, a Her greatest enemy is not Loth, nor any drow, but Orcus, the demon prince of undeath. Once Caranthali accomplished the unthinkable, she destroyed him. She wiped his name from all mortal memory through a powerful curse, severing him from his own myth. For a time, Orcus was forgotten, powerless, but the abyss is never still. Through strange magic and cosmic events, Orcus clawed his way back into existence, reclaiming his name, his realm, and his throne. He drove Caranthali out of Thanatos, her domain of the dead, and their war has raged ever since. It is a cold, relentless hatred between two beings who will never stop until the other is gone forever. Within Drow society, Caranthali's worship is forbidden, even by Loth's standards, but her cult endures in secret crypts and unmarked graves, in the grief-stricken hearts of the betrayed. She draws followers who have lost everything. A priestess whose family was murdered may pray to the Revenancer to raise them once more. A disgraced
You'll need a top-notch
So
team
as
to win
everybody's
this one.
favorite white man, I have a lot of white viewers. And a lot of people who like white people who are my viewers. White guilt is the biggest load of bullshit that's ever been perpetuated by the majority of society. Guys, I'm gonna say it, white people are great. Now there was one white guy who like killed millions of people, but hey, there's a person like that for every race. So I don't know why white people are the only motherfuckers who are getting guilt for having one of our kind kill another motherfucker, okay? Like, hello, Mao Zedong? Are we gonna forget about this guy? Like, what? Oh, I never hear a fucking Chinese person getting called, you're literally Mao Zedong. But I hear every motherfucker, every white person being called Hitler. So let's talk about white guilt. Let's get into it. Let's talk about it. All white guilt arguments ranked and debunked. Let's get into it. I love the Chinese, by the way. Let's go.
There's constant accusation in our own societies that European history and heritage are uniquely evil. But are the accusations justified?
Let's
In
hear
this
it.
video, we'll be ranking and debunking every argument in favor of white guilt
The battle
on a
starts
tier
in
list.
5.
Good.
The tiers will be as follows:
3,
strong for
2,
arguments that have merit,
1.
flawed for arguments that make too
You
much
have to
belief,
stop them from
negative
securing the
IQ
mission
for
area.
arguments that fail to meet even the most basic standards of logic, and the this for arguments born out of malice.
Let's do it.
Starting off with transatlantic slavery. This is historical abuse.
This one is completely false. White people should be celebrated for freeing slaves from slavery when their own kind sold them into slavery. So slavery made white people look better, but for some reason the entire world agrees to lie and say that we were the ones who started. It's not. We were the first to abolish it, and everyone else in the world is doing it. That's bad. Let's keep going.
Literacy at its finest. Did white people practice slavery? Yes. Who else practiced slavery?
Everyone.
Literally every other society.
Facts.
It gets even more absurd when getting to the specifics. Was the transatlantic slave trade the largest slave trade in history? No. It wasn't even the largest in its own time. And how did Europeans get their slaves? Did they raid Africa and capture random civilians?
Black people sold black people into slavery.
No. They went to African kings and purchased people already enslaved by their
We was kings! That's crazy, bro. That's crazy.
But there is one aspect that is unique to European slavery, the fact that they ended. Europeans were the first civilization to declare slavery and moral slavery, abolished it internally, and then spent blood and treasure suppressing it globally. Europeans shouldn't be shamed for their slaves. They should be honored. Negative attitude. Europeans did colonialism. The idea is that Europeans uniquely conquered most of the world and exploited others for their own gain. The issues are myriad. Firstly, colonialism is not unique to Europeans. Just like slavery, every other society did it. What was unique was the scale. Every society tried to conquer the world, only Europeans actually managed it.
True.
And what did Europeans do when they achieved their world conquest? They gave it back. Every other society held their conquest to the bitter end. But Europeans felt bad about conquering the world and gave it back. Besides, nowadays, colonialism is just an excuse for corrupt governments for why their nations are backwaters. It was not uncommon for the local population to have been better off under European rule than the present. Post-colonial governments consistently fail to maintain even the most basic interests. As the saying goes, what did Zimbabwe use for lighting before cameras? Electricity. Negative IQ.
So a lot of people like to do the open border, stolen land argument, where, no one's illegal on stolen land. Well, the reality is that that argument falls apart very quickly. I mean, what you're saying is anybody can belong on any property, but what that's going to do is that's going to promote all countries to be at Oregon and white person's right. And I promise you these countries don't want white to equal right again, because if so, we're going to body a lot of motherfuckers. Okay, you do not want the United States to start rolling out with their military. What the fuck do you think Canada's going to do against America if might equals right? What the fuck do you think Mexico is going to do against the U.S.? What the fuck do you think they're going to do? Right? So, like, don't say this shit. Let everybody have their fucking space and let people say, hey, you can't come into your space if we don't want you here. Okay? If you don't come here legally, we don't want you. If you come here legally and you make the country worse, then get the fuck out. That easy. And that should be okay. Hey. If I went to China and I started doing millions of dollars of daycare fraud, they have every right to kick me out. And to be honest, they have every right to execute me. To be honest, if I go in there and I just start raping motherfuckers, they have every right to fucking cut my fucking head off. Right? Because that's what happens when you let these criminals into your fucking country and they do more criminal shit. They need to get the fuck out. Really that easy.
Quote, we wiped out indigenous people. This is mostly a fact. In places where the indigenous actually developed a civilization, like Latin America, the native population just mixed with the European population. In fact, the colonization of Latin America was a cooperative effort between Europeans and locals, who were dissatisfied with their local hegemon, like the Aztecs. That's why a meager force of only 500 conquistadors were able to topple an empire like the Aztecs. They didn't do it alone. There were, of course, specific inexcusable examples. But again, nothing unique. If anything here is unique, it's the general restraint Europeans showed compared to other peoples. This argument is flawed, not for you, because there were genuine tragedies, but they are misrepresented as intentional extermination rather than demographic collapse, primarily by disease. Next argument, first, France is European. Strong here, moving on. Systemic oppression.
I've actually never heard that one.
/ white privilege. This argument claims that European state society has specifically preyed on non-whites to the benefit of the white population.
You know what's crazy? The thing about white privilege is it's actually the opposite. Because in today's day and age, there are thousands of companies that are hiring in case you are not white. And the amount of jobs that are going to less qualified non-whites is now the highest it has ever been. Which means that as a black person, you can get hired with far less certification than you would be as a white person with higher certification. So I don't want to hear nothing about this white privilege bullshit. It isn't working against us for years. It's a complete fucking lie.
This claim is ideological nonsense with the explicit aim to demoralize. Aside from failing to be able to point to any current law that actually advantages whites over non-whites, there's also a much simpler rebuttal. If a European society is so brutally unfair to non-whites, then why do so many do everything they can to immigrate here? Third-world societies are so awful to non-whites, we'll be seeing incredible levels of emigration, not immigration. People vote here, and they are voting overwhelmingly toward European societies.
It's crazy how all these people talk about how shitty white people are in the United States, right? Yet they all come here. And here's the other thing. It's not like there's any other country that has a white mass migration problem, yet we have a mass migration problem from almost every other race. So I don't want to hear no bullshit about how white people are fucking terrible. If these people are retarded saying this shit.
Continuing on with this cow delusion, quote, white people are inherently racist. This one is...
There's a difference between being racist and being aware of statistics. right? And it's kind of like playing your odds, you know? Do you want to walk on the street with the nice, upstanding citizen, or do you want to walk on the side of the street with someone who's a lot more likely to have 25 or 5 kills? You know what I mean? It's like you want to gamble in life right now? Not really. Sometimes you got to judge a book by its cover. You do. And listen, I'm sorry. If you're walking down the street with your shirt, your pants hanging around your ankles, and you got the grill on, and you got the tattoos all over your face, I'm sorry. I'm locking my car door, or I'm walking to the other side of the road and running. I'm just not risking that shit, okay? If you have tattoos on your eye, the teardrops going down your face, I'm just gonna turn around. I'm not risking that shit. I'm good. And the thing is, as a white man, you know I'm bald, I'm a big guy, I got a beard, I walk around like a jackass, and I don't hold it against anybody when they see me coming down the street and they go the other way. I don't blame people when they clutch their purse when they see me coming down the street. I realize I look like a fucking criminal. It is what it is. And I talk like an asshole. I don't care. Is what it is. I don't blame you, okay? It's survival instincts. No one should see anybody walking down, dude, let's just be completely fucking real. If I was, you know, and I hate to say this, but if Irina Zarutska was a little bit more racist, she'd be alive right now, okay? She would. Anybody who saw the way that guy looked behind her would not have their fucking headphones in, browsing fucking social media, never checking behind them. That guy literally reeked murderous aura. I'm sorry, but that's the fucking truth. And I hate how a person putting their racism aside got them killed. Yep. Guys, I'll be real. I don't let anybody get behind me. Even at an arcade. Mexican, black, Asian, normal people, doesn't matter. If someone gets up behind me, if someone's walking a little bit close behind me, I turn around and I say, yo, back the fuck up. Straight up. When I go to a movie theater, I sit in the back row every time. I'm not letting any motherfucker catch my back. Ever. Never. If I'm playing cards and someone tries to watch me play, I say, you can watch from the other side. Get the fuck off my back. What do you mean, normal people? Well, you know. That one always farms.
Just false. White people consistently show the lowest in-group preference out of all populations in all studies. This is nothing more than a lie designed to demoralize, exploiting the guilt-based high-trust culture of Europe.
No, it's actually crazy because, like, I'm gonna be real, like, I am a white man. And I know a lot of white people. And I've known a lot of white people. I don't know any white people who are genuinely racist that are still alive today.